Hello and welcome to Unacademy's Let's Crack UPSC in English channel. I am Rajshekar Reddy, faculty for Current Affairs. To tell something about myself, I have cleared the civil service examination in 2014. I have 7 years of experience teaching civil services aspirants and I am a BTech Computer Science graduate from JNTU Hyderabad. My experience in writing the civil service examination will be immensely useful for you to crack at the earliest point of time. You need to download and subscribe to the Unacademy Learning app. By doing so, you get a number of advantages. You have live classes. You can chat with the educator during the class. You can engage in discussions, ask your doubts, answer polls all while the class is going on. The courses in the learning app are structured, which comprehensively deal with the civil services examination syllabus. You also have live tests and exams, and you have unlimited access to content on the Unacademy platform. India's best educators are teaching on the Unacademy platform, so you have access to the best quality coaching for the civil service examination. You have a number of options. There are different courses within the same subject given by various people, so you can have access to all these courses by downloading and subscribing to the Unacademy Learning app. You need to subscribe. A number of options are available. So the best option is the 24 months option, which gives a 67% discount. You will get an additional 10% discount if you use my code RRUPSC. The final transaction cost will be for 57,600, and you can convert this transaction into no cost EMI, and you can extend the no cost EMI facility up to 24 months. So let us start with the topics for today's class. So we are actually making a series called Top 200 Topics in Current Affairs for Civil Services Prelims 2020. So we have already done 17 topics. So they are in lectures 1, 2 and 3. So this is lecture 4 on the important topics in current affairs for Civil Services Prelims 2020. So in this lecture, we will be looking at some prizes, electoral bonds, special 301 report, the Indian State of Forest report, and the exit of the United States of America from the World Health Organization. So we will be dealing with 6 topics in this series of lecture. Dada Saheb Phalke Award, National Film Awards, Oscars, Pulitzer Prize, electoral bonds, special 301 report, geographical indication, Indian State of Forest report, USA and the World Health Organization. So let us start with the first topic. So this is a simple question but commonly asked in competitive examinations. So this topic is Dada Saheb Phalke Award, and this topic falls under a very important topic called awards, categories and winners. In the civil services prelims examination, you will be getting at least one question on awards, categories and winners. They may give you an award and they'll ask you in which category is this particular award given, or they will ask you who is the recipient of a particular award in the latest year. So Dada Saheb Phalke Award is the most prestigious award in the film industry in India. So let us know something about the Dada Saheb Phalke Award and the latest recipient of the Dada Saheb Phalke Award. So to honor the father of Indian cinema, Dhundiraj Govind Phalke, the National Film Awards named the most prestigious and coveted award of Indian cinema after him. So this is the most prestigious and coveted award named after Dhundiraj Govind Phalke, who is often regarded as the father of Indian cinema. He is the man who made the first Indian feature film Raja Harishchandra in 1913. Popularly known as Dada Saheb Phalke, he went on to make 95 films and 26 short films in a span of 19 years. So this person, who is regarded as the father of Indian cinema, made India's first feature film, that is Raja Harishchandra. So you must know the first feature film of India, that is Raja Harishchandra. He went on to make as many as 95 films and 26 short films in a span of 19 years. So the Dada Saheb Phalke Award was introduced in the year 1969. So you need to remember this year. It is in 1969 that the Dada Saheb Phalke Award has been introduced by the government of India in recognition to the contribution of film personalities towards the development of Indian cinema. So this is regarded as the highest achievement in the field of cinema in India. So the first recipient of this award was Devika Rani. So Devika Rani was the first recipient of this award. Dada Saheb Phalke Award is given to a film personality for his or her contribution to the growth and development of cinema. The award comprises of a Swarna Kamal, cash prize of 10 lakhs, a certificate, a silk scroll, and a shawl. So these are given along with the award. So Dada Saheb Phalke Award is given to a film personality for his or her outstanding contribution to the growth of Indian cinema. So the latest recipient of the Dada Saheb Phalke Award. So Dada Saheb Phalke Award 2008 was announced in the year 2019. So for the 2019 year, they have not yet announced the awards. So Amitabh Bachchan, you must remember, is the latest personality to receive the Dada Saheb Phalke Award. Before him, Vinod Khanna, and before him, it was K. Vishwanath who were given the Dada Saheb Phalke Award. So this is a very simple topic but very important for your examination. Dada Saheb Phalke Award is given as part of the National Film Awards. Let us see the National Film Awards also. So there are a number of categories in which the National Film Awards will be given. We need not bother about all the categories. We just have to bother about some 5 categories. So first is Best Film. So best film in the latest version of the National Film Awards was given to Helleru. Helleru is a Gujarati film. So you must remember the name of this film. Very very important for this year's civils examination. So Helleru is the film for which the Best Picture award was given. Then we have Andhadhun, which was adjudged the Best Hindi film. Best Direction award was given to Aditya Dar for his direction of Uri Surgical Strike, the film. And Best Actor was this year given to 2 personalities. One is Ayushmann Khurrana and Vicky Kaushal. Ayushmann Khurrana for Andhadhun and Vicky Kaushal for Uri, the Surgical Strike. And Best Actress was given to Kirti Suresh for her portrayal of Savitri in Mahanati movie. So these are the 5 categories that you need to remember. So Helleru is the best film, Aditya Dar is the best director, Ayushmann Khurrana and Vicky Kaushal shared the best actor award, and the best actress was given to Kirti Suresh. So these are the most important awards at the national level. At times they can also ask you the best picture at the international level. So we often see Oscars as the highest standards of filmmaking at the international level. So the Oscars are also announced every year. They are usually announced in the month of February. So this year, that is the latest Oscar Awards, that is 92nd Academy Awards. Oscar Awards are also called by academic award name. They are also called Academy Awards. So there are 4 categories in which you need to remember the Oscars. So the best picture was given to Parasite. This is a Korean film. This is for the first time that a foreign language film was given the best picture award. So very very important. So Parasite was adjudged the best picture at the 92nd Academy Awards. Then we have best director Bong Joon-ho for Parasite. Then we have the best actress Renée Zellweger for Judy. We have the best actor for Joaquin Phoenix for Joker. So these are factual content. You must remember all these facts. So best picture Parasite. Best director Bong Joon-ho for Parasite. Best actress Renée Zellweger. Then we have the best actor Joaquin Phoenix. So this is about the awards. You will be expecting at least one question in this category. So not just the film awards, there are various categories of awards which are in the news. So we will be dealing with the other categories in the later classes. But I have started this topic. So please remember that this topic is very important. Awards, categories and winners. You can expect one question in this civil services prelims examination. Let us move on to the next topic. This is also a prize. So this also forms part of awards, categories and winners, and it is the Pulitzer Prize. So Pulitzer Prize is a very famous international award given annually. So what is Pulitzer Prize and what are the categories in which the Pulitzer Prize is given? So Pulitzer Prize was established in 1917 and has been awarded for the achievements in magazine, newspaper and online journalism. So it is basically known for magazine, newspaper and online journalism, musical composition and literature. So it is basically given in 3 fields. So one is journalism, the other is musical composition, the third is literature. So in three broad categories, this award is given every year. So these three broad categories are further subdivided into 21 categories. So Pulitzer Prize was established in 1917 and has been awarded for the achievements in magazine, newspaper and online journalism, musical composition and literature. The award was established according to the provisions in the will of Joseph Pulitzer. Joseph Pulitzer was a Hungarian-born American journalist, a very famous journalist. So he wrote a will, and this award is given in according to the provisions in the will of Joseph Pulitzer. The award is administered by Columbia University. So every year, this award is announced by the University of Columbia. This is very important. You may be asked this question in the prelims examination. Pulitzer Prize is awarded yearly in 21 categories. As I've told you, there are three broad categories, and these are further divided into 21 categories. Each winner receives a cash award and a certificate. A gold medal is also awarded to the winner in public service category. So there is a special gold medal that is given in the public service category. We need not bother about the recipients of this award because there are 21 categories in which the award is given, which means there are a large number of recipients. So you need not study the names of the recipients of this award. But interestingly, this award this year also was given to three persons for their coverage in Jammu and Kashmir during the government imposed lockdown. So Pulitzer Prize 2020 was given to three journalists from India. So Yasin Dar, three photographers, if I am not wrong. So Yasin Dar, Mukhtar Khan and Channi Anand. So these three persons won the prize for their coverage in the Jammu and Kashmir region during government imposed restrictions. So this is important. So you need to remember these three persons. So Yasin Dar, Mukhtar Khan and Channi Anand won for the prize for their coverage in Jammu and Kashmir region during the government imposed lockdown. So awards categories and winners. So Pulitzer Prize is also a very important award given in the field of online journalism, newspaper journalism, magazine journalism, musical composition and literature, given in 21 categories, administered by the Columbia University, and this year three Indians also received this award. Then we will move on to a very important topic. This is important for your prelims as well as the mains examination. Um what do you mean by electoral bonds? So what are electoral bonds, and what are the various aspects related to electoral bonds? So we will study about electoral bonds, various issues which revolve around electoral bonds, and what are the opinions expressed by various bodies on electoral bonds. So first of all, in the budget of 2017 and 18, the government of India announced a new method of funding for political parties that it claimed would bring about greater transparency and accountability. So electoral bonds are a system of political funding. This scheme of electoral bonds was announced in the budget of 2017 and 18. Arun Jaitley was then the finance minister, so he made the announcement of the electoral bond scheme. The objective was to bring greater political transparency and accountability. So it is alleged that most of the political parties in our country are funded using black money. And in order to bring greater transparency and accountability, this scheme was introduced by the government of India. The scheme was launched, or it was notified on January 29, 2018 by the central government. So the central government has on January 28, 2018 notified the electoral bond scheme. So what are electoral bonds and what are the various issues surrounding electoral bonds? So an electoral bond is designed to be a bearer instrument like a promissory note. So it is a bearer instrument. So what do you mean by a bearer instrument? So I have given the definition here. A bearer instrument is a security that contains no ownership information and whose physical bearer is presumed to be the owner. So it is a financial instrument which does not have any ownership information, but it is believed that whoever holds that is the owner of that particular instrument. The most perfect example of a bearer instrument is banknotes. So banknotes do not have information regarding the owner of that note. So whoever holds the banknote is considered to be the owner. So an electoral bond is designed to be a bearer instrument like a promissory note. In effect, it is similar to a banknote that is payable to the bearer on demand and free of interest. So it is a bearer instrument similar to a banknote and is payable to the bearer on demand and free of interest. Who can buy electoral bonds? So it can be bought by any person. So any citizen of India or a body incorporated in India can buy electoral bonds. So it can be bought by any citizen of India or any organization which is incorporated in India. A person or body incorporated in India who wishes to fund a political party of more than 2000 rupees can do so through a check or a digital mode. So this facility is available. So if you want to make a political fund, so if you want to fund a political party, and if the amount is more than 2000 rupees, then you can do so only by digital means, that is through check or other digital modes, and that can be done only through electoral bonds. So donations less than 2000 rupees can still be given in cash, but donations more than 2000 rupees can be made only through check or digital mode. So in this case, electoral bonds are the instruments that are available to fund political parties. Electoral bonds can function like gift vouchers. So this is a perfect example. So electoral bonds are like gift vouchers. So you buy an Amazon gift voucher. So whoever has that gift voucher is said to be the owner of that voucher. So you can buy gift vouchers and you can give them to a person or party of your choice. So similarly, electoral bonds function like gift vouchers. The bonds can be bought and can be given to a political party of your choice. So the bonds will be issued in multiples of 1000, 10,000, 1 lakh, 10 lakhs and 1 crore. So the denominations in which these bonds are available are 1000, 10,000, 1 lakh, 10 lakhs and 1 crore. So these are available in various denominations and will be available only at specified branches of the State Bank of India. So they are not available everywhere. They are available only at select branches of the State Bank of India. So electoral bonds are a way by which individuals or corporates can fund political parties. They have to be bought in multiples of either 1000, 10,000, 1 lakh, 10 lakhs, and 1 crore at specified branches of the State Bank of India. So they can be bought by the donor with a KYC compliant account. So the donor, that is whoever buys the electoral bond, must have a KYC compliant account. Donors can donate the bonds to their party of choice, which can then be cashed in via the party's verified account within 15 days. So it has to be encashed by the political party within 15 days, and the donors can donate the bonds to the party of their choice who have a verified account with the Election Commission of India. So it must be bought and it must be encashed within 15 days. So this is how an electoral bond looks like. So this is an electoral bond of 1000 rupees, and as I've told you, State Bank of India is the organization that is responsible for giving electoral bonds. So here see the branch, so select branches. So State Bank Bhavan, Madam Kama Road, Nariman Point, Mumbai. So this is the branch which has given this award. So this is a bearer instrument, and you buy this electoral bond and you give it to a party of your choice. The bonds will be available for purchase for a period of 10 days each in the beginning of every quarter. So they are not available throughout the year. They are available only for a period of 10 days once in every 3 months. So with the beginning of the quarter. So as you all know, the financial year in India begins on April 1st and ends on March 31st. So the financial year is divided into 4 quarters. So January 1st to 10th, April 1st to 10th, July 1st to 10th, and October 1st to 10th are the dates on which these electoral bonds can be sold by the State Bank of India. So the bonds will be available for purchase for a period of 10 days, each in the beginning of every quarter, that is January, April, July, and October. This is very important. So they are not sold throughout the year. They are sold only for a brief period in every quarter. An additional period of 30 days will be available, or an additional period of 30 days shall be specified by the central government in the year of Lok Sabha elections. In the year of Lok Sabha elections, electoral bonds will be sold for 30 more days, and this period will be specified by the central government. So this is something which is very important. In essence, the donor and the party details will be available with the bank, but the political party might not be aware of who the donor is. So assume that I have bought an electoral bond and I have donated it to a political party X. So in essence, the donor, that is I, will be known to the bank. So my details will be available with the bank, but I give it to my friend and he donates to a political party. So the political party does not know whether I have given or whether I have made the donation or not. So in essence, the donor and the party details will be available with the bank, but the political party might not be aware of who the donor is. So the political party in this case may not be aware of who the donor is. The intention is to ensure that all the donations made to a party will be accounted for in the balance sheets without exposing the donor details to the public. So the intention is to make the donor anonymous. At the same time, the intention also is to cleanse the political funding system. So it also is meant for promoting a cashless system of donations. So what is the controversy? So there is a huge controversy with respect to electoral bonds. So a number of political parties, especially opposition political parties, have criticized this scheme. So ever since its launch in 2018, most of the political funding went to the ruling party, and the opposition parties were very critical of this scheme. So why are they critical, and what are the reasons behind this criticism? So experts are of the view that if the electoral bond scheme has been introduced to bring about greater transparency, the government must not restrain from allowing the details of such donations to be made public. So this is very, very important. If the purpose of the electoral bond scheme is to promote transparency and accountability, what is the reason of maintaining secrecy when it comes to the details of the donation? So this is quite surprising. This scheme was introduced to promote greater transparency and accountability, but the political party does not know who the donors are, and the people of our country do not know which person is donating to which political party. So there is greater mystery surrounding the electoral bond scheme. So experts are of the view that if the electoral bond scheme had been introduced to bring about greater transparency, the government must not restrain from allowing details of such donations to be made public. Experts and several politicians say that since neither the purchaser of the bond nor the political party receiving the donation is required to disclose the donor's identity, the shareholders of a corporation will remain unaware of the company's contribution. So assume that a company has made a political contribution to a party X. The shareholders of that company must be knowing whether a political party received any money from that particular corporation. In this case, the political party, the contribution made by the corporation is not made public to the shareholders. So experts and several politicians say that since neither the purchaser of the bond nor the political party receiving the donation is required to disclose the donor's identity, the shareholders of a corporation will remain unaware of the company's contribution. So here companies make contribution to political parties, but the shareholders of the company do not know whether such political donations have been made or not. This is something which is very surprising. Voters too will have no idea of how and through whom a political party has been funded. So voters in our country also do not have any idea as to how a political party is being funded in our country. Opponents of the electoral bond scheme argue that since the identity of the donor has been kept anonymous, it could lead to influx of black money. So this is also an opportunity for influx of black money because the identity of the donor itself is kept anonymous. So opponents of the electoral bond scheme argue that since the identity of the donor has been kept anonymous, it could lead to an influx of black money. Some others allege that the scheme was designed to help big corporates donate money without their identity being revealed. So there are a number of corporate companies who wish to make donations to political parties, but they don't want to be associated with the political parties. So they don't want to reveal the identity of the donations. So this scheme basically is aimed at facilitating the big corporate houses who make political donations. So many people allege that the scheme was designed to help big corporate houses donate money without their identity being revealed. According to the civil rights societies, the concept of donor anonymity threatens the very spirit of democracy. So, donor anonymity, which forms the basis of the electoral bond scheme, threatens the very spirit of democracy. The Congress party said that the donations made through electoral bonds were equivalent to money laundering. So, they have gone ahead and criticized that these donations are equivalent to money laundering. So, the Congress party said the donations made through electoral bond schemes were equivalent to money laundering. So By introducing this scheme, they have made certain changes to laws that are enacted in the past. So these restrictions which were in force before the introduction of the electoral bond scheme were removed. So these restrictions include restrictions that were done away with after the introduction of the electoral bond scheme are, so earlier no foreign company could donate to any political party under the Companies Act. This is very very important. So some restrictions which were imposed on political funding were removed with the introduction of this scheme. So what are the restrictions that have been removed? So first and most importantly, foreign companies could not donate to any political party under the Companies Act, but now that restriction has been removed. A firm could donate a maximum of 7.5% of its average 3-year net profit as political donations according to Section 182 of the Companies Act. This is also very, very important. Only profit making companies which have been established at least 3 years ago can donate a maximum of 7.5% of their profit. This was the condition prevalent before the introduction of the electoral bond scheme. So a company must have been established for more than 3 years. Second, it must be making profits. Third, only 7.5, a maximum of 7.5% can be given as donation to a political party. Interestingly, this restriction has also been removed under the electoral bond scheme. So this is very, very strange. So this gives an opportunity for shell companies being floated for making political donations. As per the same section of the Act, that is Section 182 of the Companies Act, companies had to disclose the details of their political donations in their annual statement of accounts. So the companies were supposed to make their political donations public in their annual statement of accounts earlier, but now they need not disclose the political donations that they make. The government moved an amendment in the finance bill to ensure that this proviso will not be applicable to the companies in case of electoral bonds. So as I've already told you, companies need not disclose the details of their political donations. So thus Indian, foreign and even shell companies can donate to political parties without having to inform anyone of the contribution. So any company, Indian, foreign or even shell companies can make donations without having to inform anyone of the contribution. So what are the opinions expressed by the other important organizations with respect to this scheme? So there was a challenge made against the validity of this scheme in the Supreme Court. Pleas were made to stay this scheme, but the Supreme Court interestingly has refused to stay the electoral bond scheme. So the Supreme Court refused to stay the usage of electoral bonds for political donation, but said all political parties must reveal the details to the Election Commission in a sealed cover by May 30th. So they have asked, this was last year, so by May 30th, political parties were asked to reveal the details of the donations made to them in a sealed cover by the Supreme Court. But further notice has not been given, so they have not yet fixed the date for hearing electoral bonds case again. So the apex court is yet to fix a date for hearing other pleas against the electoral bonds. So the Supreme Court refused to stay the usage of electoral bonds for political donations, but said that all parties must reveal the details to the Election Commission in a sealed cover by May 30. The apex court is yet to fix a date for hearing other pleas against the electoral bonds. So this is what the Supreme Court said. Then what did the RBI say? So according to an article published in HuffPost India on November 18, 2019, the RBI was critical of this scheme. So the RBI was extremely critical of this scheme. The central bank had warned the government that the bonds would undermine the faith in Indian banknotes and encourage money laundering. So this is a very serious criticism made by the Reserve Bank of India. So the Reserve Bank of India said that this scheme would undermine the faith in Indian banknotes and encourage money laundering. So they have stated that this scheme will undermine the faith in Indian banknotes and encourage money laundering. Election Commission of India has also given its views on electoral bonds. The Election Commission of India on April 10, 2019 told the Supreme Court of India that while it was not against the electoral bond scheme, it did not approve the anonymous donations made to political parties. So though it did not oppose the electoral bond scheme, it was against anonymous donations made to political parties. That is what the Election Commission of India has specifically said. A right to information plea has revealed that 99.8% of donations that political parties received through electoral bonds between March 2018 and January 2019 were of the highest denominations, that is rupees 10 lakhs and 1 crore. So, a right to information plea has revealed that 99.8% of the donations were in these two denominations, 10 lakhs and 1 crore. This indicates that this scheme was especially targeted at the big corporate houses. So, a common man will not donate 10 lakhs or 1 crore to a political party. So, most of the donations made to political parties, in this case, only the ruling party actually got most of the donations, and most of these donations were in high denominations, that is 10 lakhs and 1 crore. So, this actually reveals that this scheme actually was made for the big corporate houses. The reduction in cash donations from 20,000 to 2,000 is not good enough. There are parties with hundreds of crores of declared income who claim that all the funds were received from small cash donations of 100 or less. So this cannot be merely prevented by reducing the cash limits. So they have reduced the cash limit of political donations, but they have not eliminated cash limits. So earlier the cash limit was up to 20,000. So if you want to make a political donation or a donation to a political party, then you can make the donation in cash up to 20,000 rupees. Now it has been reduced to 2,000 rupees. But there are political parties who have crores and crores of funds, and these parties say that they have received these funds in the form of small cash donations of 100 rupees or less. So 100 rupees or less is the donation that is made, and this is made by lakhs and lakhs of people, and that is how we got this money. That is what the political parties say. So this is about electoral bond scheme. This comprehensively deals with the issue of electoral bonds. So I'll just repeat what I have said. This is a scheme which was announced in the budget of 2017 and 18, and this scheme was aimed at bringing greater transparency and accountability. The central government notified the scheme in January 2018. Since then, it has become very controversial. An electoral bond acts as a bearer instrument, and any person can buy this electoral bond and donate to a party of his choice. Electoral bonds function like gift vouchers, and they can be bought in multiples of 1,000, 10,000, 1 lakh, 10 lakhs, and 1 crore at specified branches of the State Bank of India. If you want to buy an electoral bond, then you have to have a KYC compliant account. Donors also can deposit these bonds only in a verified account of the Election Commission of India. So this is how an electoral bond looks like. Then the bonds will be open for purchase at select branches of the State Bank of India during specified periods in the for 10 days in each quarter. During the Lok Sabha elections, this period will be extended by 30 more days. The anonymity of the donor is the fundamental concept behind the electoral bond scheme. So the political party do not know who has actually donated this money to that party, but in reality they actually know who has made the donation. So why is the controversy? So there are a number of controversies. So first of all, it violates the principle of openness. So the voters are not aware of what and how a political party is getting its political funding. Then there are various other issues that we have discussed. So they have made some changes to the Foreign Contribution Regulating Act, allowing foreign companies to make political donations. They have removed the limits of 7.5% of the profit that can be made to a political party. So they have made removed all these restrictions, and that is the reason why this scheme has become very, very controversial. Please go through this file. So this comprehensively deals with this topic. So in the prelims examination, they will ask you statements on electoral bonds, and they'll ask you whether these are correct or not. These statements are correct or not. So every point here mentioned here is a potential question. So they can ask you statements on the validity of the electoral bonds, when were they launched, etc., etc. So let us move on to the next topic. So the next topic is the Indian State of Forest report. So what do you understand by the Indian State of Forest report? Who releases the Indian State of Forest report? And what are the highlights of the Indian State of Forest report? So the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change releases the biennial Indian State of Forest report. So this is a report released once in every 2 years, and this report is released by the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. So this report highlights the forest cover in our country. So you can be asked questions on the forest cover in India and the distribution of forest in our country. So the report is published by the Forest Survey of India, which has been mandated to assess the forest and tree resources of the country. So the report is published by the Forest Survey of India, which has been mandated to assess the forest and tree resources of the country. So this report is published by the Forest Survey of India under the Ministry of Forest, Environment, Forest and Climate Change. So this report was published for the first time in 1987, and till date 16 reports have been published. So the latest is the 16th report in the series. So what are the highlights of this report? So this is something which you need to know. According to the report, India is among the few countries in the world where forest cover is consistently increasing. So this is very interesting. So India is only India is among a few countries in the world where forest cover is consistently increasing. The total forest and tree cover of the country is 80.73 million hectares. So the total forest and tree cover is 80.73 million hectares, which is 24.56% of the geographical area of the country. So the total forest and tree cover of the country is 24.56%. So you need to remember this number. So 24.56% is the total forest cover plus tree cover. It is not just the forest cover. So I have mentioned forest cover plus tree cover. The Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change defines forest cover. So what is the difference between forest cover and tree cover? This is mentioned here. So the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change defines forest cover in India as all lands more than 1 hectare in area with a tree canopy density of more than 10%. So in order to be declared as a forest, the land must be at least 1 hectare in area, and there should be a density of more than 10% of the tree canopy. Tree canopy refers to the upper branches of a tree. So the density of the tree canopy must be more than 10% in that area. So this is very important. The area must be at least 1 hectare and the density of tree canopy must be at least 10%. This is what is added into forest. And what is tree cover? So forest cover is all lands more than 1 hectare in area with tree canopy density of more than 10%. Very, very important. And what do you mean by tree cover? Tree cover is tree patches outside recorded forest areas, exclusive of forest cover and less than the minimum mappable area of 1 hectare. So all tree patches that are outside the forest areas are added as part of tree cover. So tree patches outside recorded forest areas exclusive of forest cover and less than the minimum mappable area of 1 hectare. So trees that are present in areas that are less than 1 hectare are included as part of the tree cover. So forest plus tree cover in India is 24.56%. This is what you need to know, and it has actually increased from last year. So compared to the assessment of 2017, there has been an increase of 5,188 square kilometers in the total forest and tree cover of the country. So there has been an increase of 5,188 square kilometers. Out of this, the increase in the forest cover has been 3,976 square kilometers, and tree cover increase is 1,212 square kilometers. So this is the increase in forest cover and tree cover. The top 3 states showing an increase in forest cover are Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh and Kerala. So this is very important. Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh and Kerala have shown the highest increase in forest cover. Area wise, this is very, very important. Area wise, Madhya Pradesh has the largest forest cover in the country, followed by Arunachal Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Orissa and Maharashtra. So area wise, Madhya Pradesh has the largest forest cover in the country, followed by Arunachal Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Odisha and Maharashtra. So in India, the largest forest cover is present in the state of Madhya Pradesh. In terms of forest cover as percentage of the total geographical area, the top 5 states are Mizoram, Arunachal Pradesh, Meghalaya, Manipur and Nagaland. So in terms of forest cover as percentage of total geographical area. So forest cover as percentage of total geographical area is also very important. So Mizoram Arunachal Pradesh, Meghalaya, Manipur, and Nagaland. So these are the top 5 states. All these states are in the northeastern part of our country. So you need to remember these 2 points. Madhya Pradesh is the state which has the largest forest cover. In terms of percentage of forest cover to the total geographical area, then the state is Mizoram. Mangrove forest data is also given. So the mangrove ecosystems are unique and rich in biodiversity, and they provide numerous ecological services. Mangrove cover has been separately reported in the Indian State of Forest Report 2019, and the total mangrove cover is 4,975 square kilometers. So this is a small point that you need to remember. Mangrove cover in India is 4,975 square kilometers, and it has witnessed an increase of 54 square kilometers. The top 3 states where the mangrove cover has increased is Gujarat, followed by Maharashtra and Odisha. So Gujarat, Maharashtra, and Odisha have shown an increase in the mangrove cover. So this is about the Indian State of Forest Report. Then we will move on to the next topic. So the next topic is Special 301 report. This is a very important topic for your exam. So what is the Special 301 report, and who publishes this Special 301 report? So this report is published in the month of April. So it is published on the last day of April by the United States State Representative. And whenever this report is published, there will be tension in India, because India may be placed in a particular category of countries which attract sanctions. So India continues to remain in the United States priority watch list for alleged violations of intellectual property rights. So in which category has India been placed in the Special 301 report? This is a commonly asked question in the examination. So India continues to remain. So India has remained in this category for several years. So India continues to remain in the United States priority watch list. So this is very important. Priority watch list for alleged violations of intellectual property rights. So for alleged violation of intellectual property rights, India continues to remain in what is called the priority watch list. Then what is this report and who publishes this report? So the Special 301 report is prepared annually by the Office of the United States Trade Representative. So Special 301 report is prepared annually by the United States Trade Representative. So this is the body that prepares the Special 301 report. And this report identifies trade barriers to the United States companies and products due to intellectual property laws such as copyright, patent, and trademarks in other countries. So the report highlights the problems faced by American companies with respect to intellectual property laws. So with respect to intellectual property rights, the problems that are faced by the American countries are mentioned in the Special 301 report. So this is a very important report. Special 301 report is a report prepared annually by the Office of the United States Trade Representative. It highlights the trade barriers which the US companies face because of intellectual property laws such as copyrights, patents, and trademarks in other countries. By April 30 each year, the United States Trade Representative must identify countries who do not provide adequate and effective protection of intellectual property rights or fair and equitable market access to the United States persons that rely on intellectual property rights. So as I've told you, this is a report that is prepared annually by the United States Trade Representative, and this report must highlight the problems that are faced by the American companies in having a fair and equitable market access in other countries of the world. The Special 301 report is published pursuant to Section 301 of the Trade Act. Why is it called the Special 301 report? Because it is published under a particular section of the Trade Act of 1974. So the Special 301 report is published in pursuant of Section 301 of the Trade Act. So you need to remember that countries are classified into various categories, but 3 categories are important here. First is priority foreign country. So if a country is placed in the priority foreign country category, then sanctions are imposed on that country. So first and the most important category is priority foreign country. If a country is placed in the priority foreign country category, then there are sanctions imposed on that particular country. In the latest report, there are no countries in the world that are placed in this particular category, that is priority foreign countries. So this is point number 1. So priority foreign country, so there is no country in the priority foreign country list. Then there are certain warning lists that are mentioned. So these are priority watch list and priority watch list and watch list. So trading partners that currently present the most significant concerns regarding IP rights are placed on priority watch list or watch list. So the second list is the priority watch list and the third list is the watch list. So in these countries, the US companies have certain concerns with respect to intellectual property rights. So priority foreign country, priority watch list, then we have the watch list. So priority watch list has these countries: Algeria, Argentina, Chile, China, India, Indonesia, Russia, Saudi Arabia, Ukraine, and Venezuela. So these are the countries that are mentioned in the priority watch list. So India is in the priority watch list. This is very, very important. Then there are some other countries which are mentioned here. These countries are in the watch list. So these are the 33 countries where the United States company, US companies face significant challenges with respect to intellectual property. So this is something which many people ignore, but it is a topic which is very important for your exam. When you write an essay on relationship between India and USA, you can also take a reference to the special 301 report. Then we will move on to the next topic. This is very, very important for your examination. This is called geographical indication. So what do you mean by geographical indications? And what are the products for which GI has been given very recently? So this is a commonly asked question in the prelims examination. So you will expect at least one question from this topic, that is geographical indication. So what is geographical indication? To which product is a geographical indication given? And what are the products that have been given GI status very recently? So let us see this. So geographical indication is a sign used on goods that have specific geographical origin and possess qualities or a reputation that is due to that place of origin. So this is very, very important. A geographical indication is a sign used on goods that have specific geographical origin and possesses qualities or reputation that are due to that place of origin. So it is a sign. First of all, geographical indication is a sign which is given to goods which have special geographical origin and possess qualities or reputation that are due to that geographical origin. For example, take Darjeeling tea. Darjeeling tea is said to be one of the best tea varieties in the world. It has got its unique aroma, and many people say that its unique aroma is because of the high lime content in the soils of the Darjeeling region, and that is the reason why Darjeeling tea has got some special qualities. So here, Darjeeling tea is a geographical indication. This tea variety owes its characteristics because of the soils of Darjeeling. So Darjeeling tea owes its variety because of the soils in Darjeeling region. So that is the reason why it is called a geographical indication. Most commonly, a geographical indication consists of the name of the place of origin of the goods. So it usually has GI products have the place of origin that is mentioned in the GI tag. So most commonly, a geographical indication consists of the name of the place of origin of the goods. Agricultural products typically have the qualities that derive from their place of production and are influenced by specific local factors such as climate and soil. Many products are given GI status. Handicrafts, agricultural goods, food varieties are also given GI status. Agricultural products usually have their quality because of the various local factors, especially climate and soil. So what does a geographical indication do? A geographical indication points to a specific place or region of production that determines the characteristic qualities of the product that originates therein. So geographical indication points to a specific place or region of production. So when you say Darjeeling tea, so Darjeeling tea is a GI. So what does it indicate? So geographical indication points to a specific place or region of production. So in this case, this tea has come from Darjeeling. That determines the characteristic qualities of the product that originates there. So the characteristic qualities of the product are also mentioned here. It is therefore important that the product derives its qualities and reputation from that place. Since those qualities depend on the place of production and a specific link exists between the products and their original place of production. Since there is a strong link between the product and the place of production, the GI indication is a way by which you know that particular product qualities. So what is the difference between a geographical indication and a trademark? This is also important. So a trademark is a sign that is used by an enterprise to distinguish its goods from services of other enterprises. So a trademark is a sign used by an enterprise to distinguish its goods and services from those of other enterprises. So you see a number of companies market their product especially through their trademark. You can see the trademarks of Adidas, you can see trademarks of Pepsi, Coca-Cola. So they are signs that are used by a particular company to distinguish its product from the product of other enterprises. It gives the owner, or it gives its owner, the right to exclude others from using the trademark. So the owner enjoys the exclusive right to sell that product using that trademark. So that is the speciality of a trademark. A geographical indication tells the consumer, on the other hand, a geographical indication tells the consumer that a product is produced in a certain place and has certain characteristics that are due to that place of production. A GI is an indication to a consumer that this product is from a particular place and it has got certain characteristics that are due to that particular place. So a trademark helps a company to market its product and to distinguish its product from other company products. Similarly, a geographical indication is an indication given to a consumer that the product is produced in a certain place and has certain characteristics that are defined to that particular place of production. Most importantly, trademark can be used only by a single company which possesses the trademark, whereas GI can be used by all persons who are involved in the production of that particular product. So it may be used by all producers who make their products in the place designated by a geographical indication and whose products share typical qualities. So whoever is registered as a producer of a particular GI, they can use the GI sign. So GI, which law regulates geographical indications in India? So the Geographical Indications Registry based in Chennai is the organization that gives GI tag to various products. So first point, GI registry is based in Chennai and it is the organization which gives GI tag to various products. So various products are given GI tag by the GI registry. So the Geographical Indications of Goods Registration and Protection Act of 1999. So this is very important. So GI of Goods Registration and Protection Act of 1999 is the act that regulates geographical indications in India. So GI of Goods Registration and Protection Act of 1999 and the Geographical Indications of Goods Registration and Protection Rules 2002 respectively deal with GI in India. So there is an act which was enacted way back in 1999. This act is compliant with the TRIPS agreement, that is Trade Related Intellectual Property Rights. So why do we need GI? So this is also very important. Why do geographical indications need protection? So geographical indications are understood by consumers to denote the origin and quality of the products. So GI is very important because many people associate with certain qualities of a particular product from a particular region. So geographical indications are understood by consumers to denote the origin and quality of the products. Many of them have acquired valuable reputations which, if not adequately protected, may be misrepresented by dishonest commercial operators. So many GI products have valuable reputation, and if these reputations are not protected, they may be misrepresented. So you can sell another variety of tea in the name of Darjeeling tea, and consumers may be fooled. So in order to prevent dishonest commercial operators from misrepresenting a geographical indication, we need to give protection to GI. So false use of geographical indications by unauthorized parties is detrimental to consumers and legitimate producers. So false use of geographical indicators by unauthorized parties is detrimental to consumers and legitimate producers. The former, that is the consumers, are deceived and led to believing to buy a genuine product with specific qualities and characteristics while they are in fact getting a worthless imitation. So the consumers are deceived to buy a fake product, whereas the producer's reputation is tarnished by the dishonest commercial operators. So the consumers are deceived and led into believing to buy a genuine product with specific qualities and characteristics, while they in fact get a worthless imitation, the later suffer damage because of valuable business in taken is because valuable business is taken away from them, and the established reputation for their products is damaged. So the producers also suffer losses because their valuable reputation is being damaged here. So recently, certain products have been given geographical indication status, GI status. So I have given a description of the products here. So in the examination, you will be asked where does a particular product come from. So they will give you a product and they will ask you where does this product come from, or this product enjoys a GI tag from which of the following states. This is a commonly asked question in the examination. They will give you combinations, a product and a state, and they'll ask you whether these combinations are correct or not, or they may ask you from which particular state is a particular GI coming from. For example, here you have a type of black rice called chakho. Chakho is a type of black rice from the state of Manipur. So this is very, very important. Chakho is from the state of Manipur. Very recently, this variety of black rice was given the GI status. Similarly, there are other. This is how chakho look like. Gorakhpur terracotta from the state of Uttar Pradesh. This is also a GI status. Recently, this has been given GI status. So this is how the terracotta figures of Gorakhpur look like. Then we have Kovilpatti Kadalai Mitai. So Kovilpatti Kadalai Mitai is a geographical indication from Tamil Nadu. So you need to remember Chakho is a geographical indication from Manipur. Kovilpatti Kadalai Mitai is a geographical indication from Tamil Nadu, and Gorakhpur terracotta is a geographical indication from Uttar Pradesh. And there is one more which was given geographical indication. This is Kashmiri saffron. Kashmiri saffron is a GI from the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir. So you need to remember these products. So these are the products which were given GI status very recently. So this is a commonly asked question in the examination. You must know the complete list of GI products. Then there are other products which were also given geographical indication status very recently. So Telia Rumal from Telangana, Sohrai Kovai paintings from Jharkhand. Then we have Tanjavur Netti Works, Tamil Nadu, Arumbavur wood carvings from Tamil Nadu. So Telia Rumal, Telangana, Sohrai Kovai paintings, Jharkhand, Tanjavur Netti Works, Tamil Nadu, Arumbavur wood carvings, Tamil Nadu. So if you try to falsify a geographical indication, then there is also a punishment prescribed under the GI Act. The punishment is imprisonment of up to 6 months, which can be extended up to 3 years, and with a fine of 50,000 rupees that can be extended up to 2 lakhs. So the act of falsely selling a product as a genuine geographical indication attracts punishment under the GI Act. So this punishment is imprisonment of 6 months, which can be extended up to 3 years, and a fine of 50,000, which may extend up to 2 lakhs. Then we will study about the last topic for today's class. So the exit of the United States of America from World Health Organization. This is actually a very small issue, but I have added this because USA has come out of a number of organizations and treaties. So I have given you the list of treaties and organizations from which the USA has left. So Donald Trump was very, very critical of the World Health Organization, and he accused the World Health Organization of deceiving the world with respect to COVID-19. So they initially Donald Trump stopped funding to World Health Organization, and now he has notified the World Health Organization that USA will come out of WHO. So the Trump administration has notified the Congress and the United Nations that the United States is formally withdrawing from the World Health Organization. So they have notified the Congress. US Congress is the Parliament of the United States of America. So they have notified the US Congress and the United Nations that they will be coming out of the World Health Organization. Mr. Trump said, because they failed to make the requested and greatly needed reforms, we will be today terminating our relationship with the World Health Organization. and redirecting those funds to other worldwide and deserving urgent public health needs. So, because they failed to make the requested and greatly needed reforms, we will be today terminating our relationship with the World Health Organization and redirecting those funds to other worldwide and deserving urgent global public health needs. So, this is what Donald Trump has said. However, it is not easy for the United States of America to come out of the WHO. There was an agreement which was signed way back in 1948. According to this agreement, the USA must notify the World Health Organization at least 1 year before it is pulling out. So, USA, we assume, has notified the World Health Organization that they wish to come out, but it will take 1 year for them to officially come out of the World Health Organization. So, this is a point that you need to remember. And World Health Organization has been criticized for various reasons. They have been criticized for the way they handled the coronavirus pandemic, and they have also World Health Organization has also showered praise on China for its handling of the coronavirus. And this is the basis for the criticism of the World Health Organization. So they have not alerted the countries in time to take the necessary steps to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic. So this is a small issue, very small issue, which I have added here. So USA has decided to withdraw from the World Health Organization, and this withdrawal process will be completed within 1 year. However, the other important point is they have come out of a number of other organizations. So, what are these organizations and treaties from which they have exited? So, Paris Agreement, which is a very famous and historic agreement to deal with climate change. So, USA has come out of the Paris Agreement. They have also come out of the United Nations Human Rights Council, UNHRC. This is also very important. They have come out of UNESCO. This is also very important. They have come out of the Iranian nuclear deal or Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. They have come out of the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty, INF Treaty, Open Skies Treaty. So very recently they have notified that they will be coming out of the Open Skies Treaty. They have also expressed their intention to come out of the Arms Trade Treaty, and they have also mentioned that they will be coming out of the optional protocol on dispute resolution to the Vienna Convention. So they have also expressed their intention to come out of the optional protocol to the Vienna Convention. They have initially expressed their intention to come out of the Universal Postal Union, but later they have not proceeded with that. So these are the agreements, treaties, and organizations from which the USA has left under the leadership of Donald Trump. So these are the topics which I have selected for today's class. So if you like the class, then please like, comment, and subscribe the video. Please call me at this number 76739399090. Please use my code RRUPSC to get an additional 10% discount on your subscription. And you also can follow me on the Telegram channel. This is my Telegram channel, Rajashekara Reddy K. So please follow me on my Telegram channel. For information and other exam related tips, you can ask me questions on Telegram. You can also get material on Telegram. So please message me on Telegram for having access to my material. So anyways, thank you for listening. Have a good day.